Hello. Hello, everybody. Let me introduce you to Harold, my Scientology Geeks support squad here. Uh,
Hello. I know. I
what
finally made it on.
I know, and what else do I call it, right? Except for that, we both have a fascination with everything that Scientology is doing. Not so much a pleasant fascination, but a fascination nonetheless, an interest, so to say.
Definitely a morbid fascination with all things culty, but Scientology is definitely a fun one because it's still here.
Yeah, and yeah, still here and causing damage every day. But today there was a little bit of movement. Now, Scientology didn't exactly do the deed, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Scientology didn't lay the groundwork for what happened to the three victims that testified in the Danny Masterson case, and the other two too that what they didn't even charge, and the others that we may presumptively assume are out there because there seemed to be a pattern of his. There's no doubt in my mind, and I know I'll get taken for task for this, and YouTube can come for me or anybody else, but there's no doubt in my mind that Scientology has not laid a foundation and cultivated the actual environment for these types of crimes to commit unhindered, un unpushed against, and unaccounted for. No accountability, no responsibility. They think it's just a-okay. Long as Danny Masterson stayed an upstart. An upstat. I call him an upstart because it fits, because he's an entitled brat. But that's like one of those misspeaks I do that I can't correct because it's exactly how I feel.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. But wow. Wow. Yes, Jujubee, I agree with you. Not to mention victim blaming, which we're not going to let this go. Thankfully, if you haven't seen the news, everybody, we're here right now because finally the jury came back after numerous days of deliberation, a long weekend break, with two guilty verdicts on Danny Masterson, on Jen B and Nat. However, they were deadlocked on Christine, um, who Christine was Jane Doe 3. She gave quite heartbreaking testimony about her long-term relationship with Danny Masterson. They could not decide. It was finally 8-5 at the end, but they were deadlocked. And so he will not be having a guilty verdict on those charges. However, due to the circumstances and the violence of the attacks, he does qualify for special circumstances, and his bail was immediately revoked, and he's remanded. Danny Masterson right now is remanded to custody and on his way to jail. He will stay there until the sentencing on August 4th. His defense attorney did plead for him, saying that, well, Harold, these charges are old. They're 20 and 23 years old.
Right.
A difficult case. They had to jump through a lot of hoops to even get it to trial. There had to be multiple victims, which there were, which the prosecution did a good job of pulling that all together. However, it's not easy. And I could tell you this, if they didn't come up with guilty on two of them, he wouldn't be in jail right now.
I was about to say it was two that were required to put him
Mm-hmm.
away, right? So
It is. It was to actually have him face the charges, but because of the force, he was actually not just charged with violation against consent. He was charged with penetration without consent in a forcible manner, in a violent, intimidating, or repercussion-inducing type manner,
right.
against their will, and that is why he's going to have it. He could face 30 years for the two, which is stronger than most, unfortunately, I say, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but unfortunately that is more than most guilty let's just use the word, most rapists faced. We'll just say, like, they're out in 10, like, they're out in 8, they're 9. They can get probation. They can get parole. Well, not Danny Masterson. He's not even, he cannot get a vacated sentence based on the actual violence of the crime because of the extra charges. He cannot get the sentence vacated. He cannot get parole or probation rather. He may, I think he maybe is still eligible for some type of parole towards the end. But this is serious. Like, hmm,
And thank goodness. And it's 15 each minimum, right?
yeah.
Or okay.
No, I think that's the max because the most he
Okay.
could get was life at 45 for 3. So I believe the 15 is the most. He's facing up to, it says up to 30 years, which would mean 15 each.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, but what happened was they took him right from the courtroom, and handcuffed him. That was it because of the extenuating circumstances, the other codes. DA Mueller came right out and started mentioning Penal Code 1166 and 120366, which both deal with sentencing requirements, the revoking of bail, the mandatory custody based on the violence of the crimes. There's provisions in the California Penal Code, mostly in 116 and 1203, that deal with the actual violence of the crime in the predator type nature of the crime. Let's just say that. So that's why he just got handcuffed and that was it. And he was stoic about the whole thing. No reaction from Danny Masterson. His wife was wailing and asked to contain herself by the judge. But his family was crying. People are quite upset on his side. But Danny, I think he knew it was coming, as he didn't have any reaction.
I guess so, because a lot of people were getting a little nervous. It was taking so long that, well, if it was going to be conviction, I think some people were thinking it was going to turn around pretty quick. But it took a while, and then there was the holiday, and it's been drawn out. So I can only imagine what was going through all of their heads when it happened. And he didn't get to go home.
He did not get to go home. And when they started the trial, when they started proceedings this morning, they opened up the court, which was late. They usually start at 9:30. They didn't start till 10:30. And the first thing that Judge Olmedo did was say, okay, she received some notices from the attorneys. She had been speaking with them, all of the attorneys, including Tom Mesereau, his old attorney on the Masterson side, and the second chair, which I cannot remember her name right now. Everyone was present because we were going to have the evidentiary hearing for the leaked discovery, redacted or not, to Vicky Povereski, the Scientology lawyer who filed a complaint and then linked all the evidence, which she's not supposed to have. Like, okay. So they were supposed to have that hearing this morning, but they decided to delay that. That's going to be next Wednesday morning. Judge decided it would be prudent, and I don't blame her, to let the jury deliberate here and see, what's going to happen. Since they were still deliberating, she didn't want to start an evidentiary hearing and have to bust it up if they came out with anything. If they had questions, she would have to stop everything. They wanted to answer jury questions or provide them whatever they needed. So she moved it. So we're not.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that was an option. I thought no matter what, they were going to wait until the jury was done to start that. But
Oh no, she was She was like, she's a busy woman. Like, she was handling two juries at a time. Did you know she was also doing a big gangland murder? Like, when this trial started on April 24th, she was still in the middle of that, and that's why we had a lot of little delays in the morning, or
right.
some breaks, because she had to handle something. She's used to these big, violent, threatening type cases. I don't think she was intimidated by the fact that it was Scientology at all. Most people a lot of people have asked me, do you think that Judge Almeida felt like, she had to walk a thin line or this and that? I don't really know how she felt. She does the best. I would just say, based on her behavior, she's one tough cookie, and she knew what
I,
she was getting into. Yeah.
I would not want to cross that woman for sure. And I mean, yeah,
Mm-mm.
based upon actions alone, she was not timid about anything, and she took some, extra precautions to sort of make sure that, they weren't trying to stuff people into the jury, right? They gave them a very
Exactly.
short amount of time to get
Mm-hmm.
in early, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
she tried to make sure they were not able to play their games, and then, thankfully this time around also allowed, testimony about it to be introduced, right?
Mm-hmm. That was the
Relevant testimony, right?
biggest change in this retrial was them to be able to actually give details about the harassment and intimidation that they felt, and that all happened because of the defense here, like, because of course prosecution put this forth in the beginning for the first trial. They wanted to talk about it. They know the women didn't come forth for this reason. They knew that they were like having difficulty even tying these cases together in bringing them forward under, because of the statute of limitations and all of this, because they didn't have the police reports filed in a timely manner. Like, they had difficulty from the start, so they wanted it forefront as to the reason why, because no jury would look at it and say, wow, 23 years later you decided it's an issue. Like, what? Like, and even when they filed the police reports, it was 10 to 13 years later. Okay. That's how long this has been going on. We're looking at 20 and 23 years since the incidences, but we're looking at police reports from 2016, 2017, 2019. Like, this has been going on for quite a while. Danny Masterson wasn't even charged with the crimes until 2020. Okay. So, whoa. But,
Right. And well,
yeah,
it's partially because of the fact that they're terrified to speak out because of the repercussions and,
it's,
right. I mean, so
mm-hmm,
that's absolutely relevant because otherwise they're going to shoot it down and
mm-hmm,
say, what are you just coming
mm-hmm.
for money later? Right. So thank
But
goodness that happened.
in the first trial, she was very careful. You see, this is why I have such great admiration for Judge Olmedo. I can't speak enough about her actual pre-thought in how the law could play out. She walked that line, and it was frustrating to those of us looking at Scientology as being a big interloper and interferer in all this, and to blame for a lot of it. Okay, we did come at it from a bit of a biased angle. Thank goodness Judge Olmedo, in her absolute walking of the fine line legally and knowing what was ahead, she actually kept it to where it only if it was actually probative and not prejudicial, in trying to give Danny Masterson the fairest trial that she could. Okay, because when Cohen kept in the first trial going on and on and on about, you mentioned Scientology and wham, Scientology, mistrial. I'm sorry. That first trial, it was like every day you knew the word Scientology or mistrial was going to come out of Philip Cohen, the defense attorney's mouth. I mean, I'm making a joke about it, but it's true. Like, go back and watch the trial. Go back and listen to my reviews on it every damn day. He complained that everybody was talking about Scientology, and I'll bet you if we count that word, he said it more than anybody. More than anybody. He just didn't
Right.
say it in front of the jury, okay? He didn't want anybody saying the word Scientology in front of the jury. And I don't blame him, because they got a bad rap for this. They are, even in my eyes, just as guilty as Danny Masterson, but we can't convict them. I do believe that if they're going to foster that kind of environment, cultivate an environment to where rape is okay, they should not have tax-free status in the United States. Matter of fact, they shouldn't even be able to organize, because if we had a gang of anybody else organized to cultivate that kind of environment, we would lock their asses up. So why do they get away with it? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Right. I mean, that's the only reason they still exist. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hopefully something happens on that front, but I still think if it does, they could probably ride it out for a while, but it's just, I think the clock is ticking finally. Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's been ticking for a while, but hopefully this will accelerate that slightly, right? Because there's going to be some other follow-on repercussions potentially. I'm
There
interested to
are
see what
potentially.
happens.
Well, here's the thing. Judge Almeida has put on the record in this trial, what got on the record against Scientology is that they had a policy that did not allow the women to go against anyone in their organization if a crime was committed. That's on the record now. That's a legal document. It was proven in court. It was proven in court. Judge Almeida made many of her decisions making that statement, allowing the testimony against Scientology in. Now, you know how that, you know a little bit about the legal, how you know how that works. Once a judge makes an actual opinion on a motion from either the prosecution or the defense, and it's public record now and part of a plea, part of the actual trial, and everything goes through, they have the opportunity to actually fight against it. And Philip Cohen did several times, but it didn't work. And it stands. Her statement
Hmm.
that they are in this trial because they put themselves in this trial by their actions and their policies. They had a written policy and by action and how they supported it of cultivating this environment there that these women could not actually go against Danny Masterson in any way because he was above them. He was an upstat. As long as he was an upstat, he could do no wrong, and that they would be excommunicated if they said anything about him. And then we actually heard testimony in this trial from Claire Headley, from the victims themselves,
Hmm.
with actually in the process that they went through, where they were told that in this relationship, because Danny Masterson was a Scientologist, and based on their beliefs and their rulings in Scientology, rape does not exist. Rape does not exist. It cannot happen. Don't use that word. It doesn't happen. The-
It's just beyond absurd that
exactly.
this little bubble still exists and that they allow these things to happen.
Yeah.
It's mind boggling. That's why I'm so fascinated with the existence of the whole thing in some way.
And also the victim blaming that they were doing. The reason that the Scientology information was allowed in even stronger during the second trial was Philip Cohen himself attacking the witnesses, saying, well, why didn't you say it before? Why now? What do you just want money? And Judge Olmedo rightly said, well, if you're going to attack on motive, saying that their motive was to get money for the civil suit, they have every right to counter that. Prosecution is allowed to bring evidence as to why this took so long, as to why they might be like a little pissed off. They're allowed to start talking about it since you seem to want to use it as a defense, the time, the delay, then open the door. What was the delay? He did this repeatedly, repeatedly.
Yeah. Well,
Eh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. No, no, you.
No, I was gonna say, just on the victim blaming, right? I mean, it's foundational to their belief system, right? It's
Hmm.
whenever something goes wrong, it's well, what did you do wrong to deserve
Right.
it, right? So
Hmm.
it's ingrained in this wacky belief system. It was made up by a guy who wrote more nonsense than any other person on earth, literally.
Exactly, exactly. And I really feel for Jane Doe 3, who is Christine Bixel. She put her name out there. I'm going to say it now because I didn't say it during my coverage, of what was going on in the trial when Tony Ortega was reporting all. Out of respect for her and the other Jane Does, just to get everybody into the habit of just referring to them as Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3, because some of the media was going a little crazy on the other two Jane Does and releasing their first names and their names and everything, so that people could figure it out. In I I don't know if I don't think they did it on purpose, but they didn't do it carefully. And with everything that was going on, their privacy alone, I know it's a trial and it's public to some degree, and that if they're going to make a claim, that the accuser has a right to face them. But that doesn't mean they have to be faced by the millions of people out here also at the same time. Now they will. I'm sure in the civil case it'll be different. They will have their names out there. It's pretty much disclosed now. Well, Christine had outed herself in like 2017 after she filed the police reports. By 2018, she was actively talking about it, and her name was all over the place between her public social media arguments with Danny Masterson over whether she was lying or not. She took great offense at the fact that this man that she loved for years and years was coming out and saying that everything she said was a lie. So, there was a big social media blitz and articles and all these around that time, and they weren't very careful about names during it. Um, Also, her
Right.
husband testified. Everybody knew who her husband was, so it was kind of
Right.
hard. It was kind of hard to keep it a secret. Okay, but I feel for her that being in the relationship the longest with him that they couldn't decide. But I can understand. I don't know about you, but I can understand where the jury would be coming from with that. Some of her testimony, brutally honest. Okay. I have no doubt that what she says happened to her at the hands of Danny Masterson happened. I believe her. I believe every word she said. But she also said things to the jury like, I loved him. I stayed to try to help him. This happened all the time. Now, that statement there, in regards to their sexual relations in general, would put doubt in a jury's mind as to at what point did it become like at what point did it become the other if this is how it was all the time. Can you see? And
Mm.
I'm not saying it didn't that she was not violated. She has some of the worst stories. Not stories, but worst testimony there. It was brutal. It was hard to read. I felt every part of it for her. I'm saying that I believe it's all true. I'm just saying some of the testimony that got pulled out and the way that Philip Cohen harped on it, I can understand where they're coming from. Okay. Especially since she went back to him after it took a long time for her to realize. And then in the testimony between her and her husband into how she realized that she was violated, because she did testify on the stand that she thought that this was just the way they were interacting with each other all along until she realized that she had been violated. It took many, many, many years, and it took a conversation with another person to do it.
Well, because they had an expert testify to the fact that this is what happens in most of these cases, right? They don't
Mhm,
just get up in front of the police, even if they're not in an insane
mhm.
cult, right? I
And
mean,
and
it's
and it was the cult that interfered here because remember, Christine was she believed in Scientology. She believed in it. Danny said she had to be in Scientology to be in this relationship with him after the first year. She signed up. She actively took all the classes, even when she reported to them she was violated. She went through ethics. She went through all the time trying to get Danny to go too, thinking that Scientology was going to help this problem for both of them. She actively tried to get him help. She wanted it. She kept trying to find the answer herself in Scientology. She went through the whole process for a very long time, believing that they were going to help her with this situation, believing what they said about it's not rape. I mean, how could you and Danny be in a relationship and rape have happened? It didn't happen. I mean, they convinced her. The belief system convinced her that's not the way she should be looking at it, that she was missing something. And to me, that's one of the most tragic parts of this whole thing that I heard during testimony, because they actually convinced her it was her fault, that she needed to do these things for Danny whenever he said, and that she had no free will. The consent doesn't exist, apparently, according to Scientology. If you're in a relationship, consent does not exist, especially not if you're giving a lot of money to the church. I mean, you
oh, of course, you can get away with
yeah.
anything then, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah,
so
because,
she didn't get in until after she got with him.
right, she was not a Scientologist
Okay,
until after. She
okay, okay.
was not. Um, and that was the longest relationship where this occurred, that was on in the trial. Okay. We heard testimony from her actually during jury deliberations. I didn't go live during jury deliberations. I felt that Tony Ortega was doing a freaking fantastic job reporting every day on what the jury was looking for and what the questions were and everything. And the waiting, you know. I didn't want to go live with just a little bit here and a little bit there. And, when somebody's doing such a good job, and we've got to hands down praise Tony Ortega for sitting there every day. Every damn day that court was in session, whether anything was going on or not, Tony Ortega was there. He was taking notes. He was trying to find out things. He was doing his reporting 2, 3, 4 times a day. He has been tied to this trial, and he deserves a lot of credit because the information that's out that all the journalists are using is coming from Tony Ortega. Okay. Unless you dragged your butt down there and sat in the courtroom, he was the one that consistently had all of the information. And even though Tony Ortega is definitely a Scientology documenter of their ill will and bad motives and bad moves. He's got all the legal cases. He's the one helping get all of this information out there. I wouldn't say he's on the side of Scientology, but I would say he was damn well pretty close to as unbiased as you can be in the reporting. Okay. When the defense made a good move, he did it word for word. He even praised Philip Cohen's dress every day as satirical commentary because,
Right.
man, is Philip Cohen a peacock or what, man? That man can, oh my God. He's like a preener for sure. Like, look at
He
me,
is a
look at me.
colorful, snazzy gentleman, that's for sure.
Yes, he is. And I think that he tried to be as fair as possible with the knowledge that he was definitely not on the side of Scientology at the time. You know, we had that whole thing in the first trial with the juror, the jury firman, and all of this other stuff. And he weathered it all well. They even tried to subpoena him for this trial
Oh,
because
that's
of
right,
an
they did.
article that Kathleen did with him, who was like the was testimony number 5 in regards to assault. She came in on this trial as another one who was at a rap party or something of that nature. And they brought her in based on the symptoms that she had the same: receiving a drink from Danny Masterson, becoming all of a sudden uncontrolled, and losing your memory as to what really was going on at the time. Because of her reporting to Tony Ortega in the article about it being more than Danny Masterson that was involved and being very confused, they tried to subpoena Tony Ortega as if he had greater detail in his notes than what he reported on. But he was ready, and he has a really good lawyer. And no way was that happening. It was a stall tactic by the defense, but it was going to stall at least a week, the rest of the jury deliberation, because he, as a journalist, they know their rights, that they have 4 to 5 days to come up with this stuff to go through their lawyers and all. You can't just subpoena them and get them on the stand the very next day. Doesn't happen like that with people in the press that have to protect the witness, have to protect their sources. Okay. There's laws that protect them. So it didn't work. And they had to actually back down, because otherwise he was going to hold his gun, and it was going to take 4 or 5 days to get him up there, and everything was going to get delayed. And Judge Olmedo rightly said, it's all in the article. There's enough there for you to use. Like, the
Right.
testimony in the article is different than what she's saying. It's in black and white, and it was published. It's a matter of record. Pull it in. Like, you don't need his notes. They were just trying to stop him. I think it might have been a way to stop him from reporting what was going on in the trial,
Right. Right.
because if he became a witness, kind of the information flow would stop, would it not? Like, he wouldn't be able to be as free with what he said to everybody out here in public. So I'm glad that it didn't work, because I mean, it'd be very hard for me to find out what's going on in Los Angeles if it wasn't for the good graces of Tony Ortega. I'll tell you that.
Right, because there was no other media coverage of this.
There
Almost, right?
was,
I mean, not a lot.
there was a couple of other ex-Scientologists, but I will say that unfortunately they caused more trouble than good for the people that were trying to prosecute this case. But rebel rousers and stuff like that. I realized that everybody, when it comes to Scientology, would you agree, Harold, that just that word causes some emotion in people, like good or bad? Like, there seems to be like a black and white divide on Scientology everywhere. It causes a lot of emotion in people. A lot of people have stories on it, for sure.
I think so. I mean, anybody who's at least kind of paid attention to it, right? I mean, some have, seen it in the news here and there, but if you haven't really taken the time to sort of look into the history and some of the things that have happened, you're like, it's just whatever. It's just some wacky self-help thing, but it's so much more than that. And it's so, I mean, the rabbit holes you can go down and so many different angles are just fascinatingly bizarre, but yeah, I agree. Folks are, if they have looked into it, you're going to have a pretty strong opinion one way or the other, right?
Yep. Well, here is a very good question from KCG, and also to everyone in the chat. I didn't get to greet you all individually, but thank you all for being here. Thank you for my moderators who showed up last minute. Thank you to Harold, who just heard the bell ringing and just came right over. All of you
Woohoo.
members and all of you new people, or anyway, you got questions, can you at me? I'm going to go back through the chat to see if I can find them, but if you have it now, just go ahead and put an at to myself or Harold, and we'll try to get to them because there is a lot of stuff to talk about on these. KCG asks, I wonder if the church will make an official statement. Doubt it. And if they do, it won't be anything to do with actually this trial or what happened. It'll be in a language of Scientology's own. Would you agree, Harold? It would be like, this is a traumatic atrocity against freedom of religion and your belief systems as a whole. This is the end of reasonableness in America. Like, we have to fight back, or some bullshit like that. Something like that.
That would be all they would say at most. And I think, I mean, they do a lot of really dumb things and insert their foot into their mouth constantly. But I have a feeling on this one, they might actually wise up enough to keep their damn mouth shut. Because there's just so much more potential bad that is coming their direction after all of this, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, now there's stuff on the record. There's something about like a grand jury trial also in investigating the meddling
That came
right
up
now, right?
Yeah. Accidentally, whoops, did that come up? Now, Tony Ortega got in a little trouble for that because they were talking about that off the record, but he could hear them. And it got
Right.
reported that there's still an active investigation. And I do believe it. Common sense tells you it has to do with the intimidation and the harassment and the stuff that was going on with the LAPD. A lot of stuff came out in this trial about reports not actually getting filed, misplaced, people taking over stuff. There was a whole big to do about them not going forward with charges in the beginning after Jane Doe 3 first filed because of the actual head detective. And I'm not going to mention names here because I don't want to slam career officials till they go through their inquiries and everything with their own people. Well, the person in charge of the detective in charge of actually getting all the information together never had the meeting with the district attorney in order to filing of charges. Actually went on vacation during the timeline deadline, never gave the deadline to the actual complainant at the time. Those are kind of things that you would think wouldn't happen in something as serious as a violent crime. If you're going to go on vacation, could you get somebody to follow up? Because the timeline passed, the DA didn't, do anything about it. They had to start the process all over again. It was a mess, Harold. The way the LAPD handled it was a bit of a mess. There are rumors about improprieties there. There always has been because Scientology is big in California. It's just huge. Okay.
Yep.
And so there are fundraisers and the chief of police is there. And, at one time they had a Scientology information kiosk in their building.
Did they really?
Yes, they did.
I did not know that.
Yes, they did. I saw pictures of it because there is a voice out there that is quite loud and who is like, I don't care what you do to me. Like, I'm just as big in Hollywood as you pretend to be. People. Leah Remini. Okay. She
Right.
she got a backbone. And she was like, she would have been fine if they just told her the truth. If they would just tell her the truth, where Shelly is or what's going on, or like they could have parted ways reasonably. I don't think she's an unreasonable person. But when you start to call her crazy and you attack her like that and you try to say she doesn't know what she's talking about, I get where she's coming from. She's going to talk louder and more often. And if you're going to play the dirty game, well, she's going to use every scrap of dirt she can find on you just as good. And she's good at it. She is a mud wrestler. She's good at it. Okay.
She does not mess around. Yeah.
She's not messing around. She's like, you push me, I'll push you. That's it. Okay. You don't want to give me the truth. I'm just going to keep pointing at it. Why aren't you telling the truth? Why aren't you telling the truth? Why aren't you telling the truth? And I support her. Now, they try to say because she supports certain people that were on different trials and everything like that, that she can't be trusted. No, that's not true. Because then if that was true, Scientology, you're all guilty because you all backed Danny Masterson this whole time. And everybody else that they have crimes on. And you won't let anybody actually talk about crimes in your organization. So don't be trying to call out Leah Remini for it. because she supported Paul Haggis. So what? So what?
Right.
Okay.
Well,
You
and you
can,
can talk about crimes, but you just have to be you got to be holding the cans so they can write it down in the book and they can get rid of the
oh, and they
beatings,
can
right?
make
Yeah.
you pay for it instead of the actual person who did it. Like
Right,
the
because it's
person,
your fault. Back to the
yeah,
self blame, right?
yeah, because you spoke on it. You said the word. So automatically it's all your fault. Like if you actually witnessed someone as Scientology, this is how I explained it to somebody. And I know it's being overly graphic and I know it's like exaggerating, but that's how I think. I think in pictures like this. Literally, if you're a Scientologist and you see another Scientologist murder somebody in cold blood, if you go to Scientology and say the word murder, you're in trouble, not them. Period. That's it.
Sorry, why are you thinking those terrible things, right? Well,
Why would
we
you?
got to go talk this out.
It doesn't matter what you saw with your own eyes. It doesn't matter that it happened. None of that matters. It's like, how could you think of that word in regards to a fellow Scientologist or a fellow Scientologist who's above you? How dare you? Like, how dare you think of
What's so crazy to me is like the whole thing was it's created by a science fiction author, right? Who is obviously clearly
how?
a lunatic, but at the same time a genius. Like he created this entire system with all of this control baked into it, and it
Okay.
is still working to this day. And
True.
it's wild.
Yeah, truth be told here, it seems like you and I are of a similar age demographic and when that came out, okay? And this comes up in every conversation I have with everyone connected to Scientology in any way. Ex-Scientologists, cult members, therapists, psychologists that I speak to, or everybody, okay? Even people just doing random podcasts or like yourself, people just looking into conspiracies and cults. When that book came out, Dianetics. Did we not think that it was just a science fiction book? Like he just wrote another science fiction book. Like he was just saying, if there could be a religion that was crazy and really messed up, it would look like this.
Right. Well, I remember, I mean, growing up seeing, the commercial with the volcanoes on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that huge big marketing thing came out. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I was younger. I didn't know what the heck it was at the time. But now looking back, I'm like, holy crap, this thing was on television. Like, what?
Right, exactly. Like, and there is rumor that he and a fellow author were sitting there like, if we could write a religion that would be like really crazy and get people to believe it, what would it be? Only he really took it to the point where people actually believed it. I actually think it started as a joke. I can't believe that anybody didn't see he was this crazy. The man, if you read it, it's insanity how they actually
It's
can think.
hard to read. Like, it's just, it just seems like the ramblings of a lunatic, right? It's so difficult
Mhm.
to even get through. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I can't figure out if he was
I
truly
I
conning everybody or if he was, I think he kind of was, but he was also just a broken person and thinking he
I
could
think he
heal
was
himself
broken.
because, yeah,
Mhm.
because by the end of his life, he clearly was eating his own bullshit. Right.
Oh, yeah, he definitely was. But here, I actually think it's a result of the magical mystery boss, to tell you the truth. If anybody remembers back then, we had Carlos Castaneda, and the people were walking around in the desert eating peyote and thinking like ravens were going to come and save the earth. These are the books that were out there at the time. This is what was going on. People were looking for answers, and it was like a more of a post-free spirit kind of thing. There was a lot of experimentation with drugs and free will, and there's got to be a better way. And the actual types of books that were out at the time, it was all nuts. It was all nuts. I mean, I
and
actually,
yeah, a lot of the families, like the folks who are second, third generation, talk about how their parents were just flower children, and they were just
mhm,
looking for something new and interesting. And then you hear it's got science in the name. You're like, well, that sounds a
right.
little more
Well,
legitimate than just a Bible thumper, right? Like,
mhm. It is kind of like when I think about it, and I know this might be like too big a topic for right now, so I'm just gonna try to make it really small. When I actually think about this and how Scientology took root, it took root because of that generation of people moving away from organized religion because we were starting to see the damage done. All everything was coming out about the Catholic Church at the time. All the rumors, like there was all this stuff about people marrying like 5 people at once, child brides, all this stuff about organized religions of all types. And I'm not going to bash like one over the other or anything. And I got nothing against belief. Believe what you want. So don't take it there. I'm talking about an organization that just turns bad. It was organized religion at the time. There was a great movement during the time that he wrote this book, Dianetics, to move away from organized religion because of the everything that was coming out. So, but people still had belief. They needed something to believe in. People were looking for a different way. There must be something better out there. We are not humans that like to think that we know everything and that we are the biggest thing out there. That's just against our nature, to be human. We're always looking for something bigger than us to guide us. There must be a way. I got to find the way. What path am I on? Is it the right one? These are questions every human has every damn day. Don't you all sit there and deny it. I know. I know. Okay. Don't come at me. You've all had these thoughts. Well, this is what I truly believe, that it was actually in search of something. It was unique and different enough. It was crazy enough to be true. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I agree, and I think there's still also a little bit of the aspect of the being sort of the keeper of the special knowledge, right? Sort of the reason that some of the conspiracy theorists do the things that they do, right? Because it was still kind of counterculture, right? It wasn't very popular, and you're like, you feel like you're in some special club that knows some truth that the rest of the people don't, right? And then you're in, and then you're stuck in, right? Because who wants? I mean, it's tremendously hard, even if you were to decide you wanted to get out to escape a system like that. And aside from even all the rules that they put in place, which make it even more impossible, right? I mean, even just if they could just voluntarily leave with no disconnection, no backlash, it would still be tough to leave because you have to admit that you were wrong about something so dumb for so long, right? So
Exactly.
it's such a weird psychological trap, but I guess we're getting a little off the trial, but yeah, we can. I can talk about this stuff
and
for
that's
hours.
okay.
Like,
You know what? Because to me, the biggest part is how this is gonna. First of all, I don't want to take away from the victims. Thankfully, the accusers, the victims, the plaintiffs in this trial, thankfully, they're going to get some justice. He was handcuffed today. Okay, gone. All right. Um, they are all ready to proceed with the civil trial. We could get back there. They can now go forward to get the replacement for everything they had to lay out and do the suffering that they've had at the hands of Scientology. In that case, in that civil lawsuit, Harold, Scientology is named. Vicky Proberesti has to show up in court to defend him or whoever they decide. But there has to be Scientology lawyers as well as lawyers for Danny Masterson. He's named also in regards to this. And since we already got guilty on this, okay, all of the testimony that has been declared here is evidence. Okay.
and no more
Evidence.
Fifth Amendment.
No Fifth Amendment. It's like
I mean,
yeah.
I'm very, very glad they got justice, but on clearly, but this next one's going to be even more interesting in a lot of ways, and especially since they're going to get dragged in. I'm just fascinated to see where this goes, and hopefully the cards start to crumble faster than the money runs out, right? And the carpet gets yanked out from under them. You know,
well, it's true. I just have to address something in the chat. No, Mrs. Cassandra, I will not handle that bird. He's right. Pecking order. Bird rules. We all know. There ain't nobody better at it than that bird. So, like, if you start with that bird, you get whatever you get. So, there you go. And I love you, Mrs. Cassandra. Well, that's the way it is. you know, okay. You must have been doing something. That's all I got to say. But they are all right by me. So, there you go. Pecking order is right. No, I am playing favorites. I'm sorry. Like right now, okay, like I don't know what you did, but they don't pick on you unless you deserved it or you asked for it. And besides, you like the attention of the birds. Stop it. Like stop it. You know it's all false crying wolf over there. Knock it off. Knock it off. anyway, Liam had a question for us. He wants to know if Tony Ortega would have been allowed in the court if he got subpoenaed, if he would have been allowed back in the courtroom. It would have been messy. I don't know how, since they actually gave him the rights as a journalist to be there every day. Okay, it would have been quite messy. And since he was there for all of the trial up until the day they would have subpoenaed him, which was after it went to it was going towards closing arguments. It was right before closing arguments. So I think that might have been part of the decision there, is that because he was like already. It would have been messy for appeal. It would have been messy for emotion, at least, to have everything stricken. You know, it would have been a hot mess. I don't think I think it would have been allowed because he'd already seen everything. So I can't see why they wouldn't, but I'm sure there's a better legal mind. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to look into that, Liam. I think they would have allowed him based on that he was there already the whole time. We saw that in the Murdaugh trial. The family that testified was there for all of the witnesses and still came up and testified. There has to be some kind of a negotiation, though, between the lawyers so that it doesn't get really messy for appeal. And with the judge. So I'm sure it would have been a sidebar before it happened, and that they would have hammered it all out in the judge's chambers or, privately, not in front of the jury. But that's a really good question. I was scared that we weren't going to get any more reporting, like, because I know it would have hampered what he could say. I just don't know if he would have been allowed in the courtroom to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah. I know it would have hampered the amount of information he could give out in some way. Of course it would. He just got legally subpoenaed, and told not to talk about the case. and all he wants to do is talk about the case. So, like, yeah, it would have been a problem. It would have been a problem. Let me see if I could see any other. So, were you following the whole thing or just bits and pieces?
Most of it here and there. I did miss a little bit here and there. So probably not as closely as you have, but I've largely been keeping up with it.
Yeah, I'm reading that some people actually read the book like we did. Anna, it was like a joke, right? Like I actually thought he was kidding. Hey, fish nerd. Uh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad you guys worked it out, Mrs. Cassandra. Now stop it, both of you. Could you, I'm busy up here. Could the two of you behave? Like, my mods, like, are you guys working with me or against me up here? Like, this is actually, like, come on. Really? All right. So I don't see any more ads for questions, but my question for you was like, did you follow like the big headline breaks? Because like we didn't really see a lot of headline breaks on this one, did we? Anything going?
No, not really. That was kind of my comment about the like major media coverage. There was not a whole lot of it. I mean, I was watching Ortega and on the other side, I know there's the feud and whatever going on with all that, right? But I try to kind of take it in from all angles, right, and take it all with a grain of salt because there's hurt feelings and all of that. But yeah, I was following pretty closely, and it was up and down. But largely, it felt to me like the defense just didn't have much of anything. All they were really trying to do is play word games and hammer and tried to say, you did not remember something exactly as it was written down there because, of course, memories never change, right? So it was shaky at best. But I guess it worked for number 3. So thank goodness it was not effective in the first 2, right?
Yeah, well, it did. I think it worked a little bit for all of them, but we noticed in the retrial, the difference between the first trial and this trial. One of the main things the prosecution did was really hammer in on why there would be discrepancies, why they would use a word here and a word there, or not mention something here and there. They brought forward expert witnesses that explained that quite well. They brought Barbara Zivian, who explained that women, or actual victims, majority were women that she was speaking about, just don't do that. Okay. You have to ask the question to get the answer. They're not just going to come and tell you every damn detail of this. It's the most embarrassing, traumatic thing that's ever happened in someone's life. And they're not going to bare bones you. They are depending on the interviewer. And then we got testimony from the police. They said, yes, you could have 5 interviewers and get 5 different statements because of how they get interviewed and how they get asked and what they ask. They did a really good job in that part, I thought, anyway. And also with talking about the fact that every single person saying this happened to them received a drink from Danny Masterson prior and lost control of their faculties. Now, they're not allowed to say he drugged them, but they are allowed to say they felt drugged. They felt out of control. and they're allowed to say how it happened. Okay. But because of the length of time, there are no forensics, and it wouldn't be prudent to charge him with drugging them. But they were allowed
Right.
to this trial, they were allowed to bring a witness from the police department who deals with date rape and deals with people being drugged to say what the standard reactions of people, how you lose your memory, what you feel like, what that is like. And although the witness list from the defense had experts on it to go against Barbara Ziv, to go against the toxicology sergeant in the LAPD, the one who does drugged crimes. Okay. Although they had those people listed, they didn't bring anybody forward to contest anything. They had no witnesses again.
Right. I think it's
Again.
because they do exactly what they would get torn apart. Right. I mean, they would try their little tactics, but I guarantee you, it would if they did, it would not have ended well. It would have ended even worse for them if they had called any of those witnesses. Right.
I think so, and they didn't in the first trial either. And they even had like Danny's assistant on there, Bree, who was part of one of the testimonies of one of the Jane Does, like because she brought her there. She was friends with her. She knows what happened. And all of a sudden, she's not on there either. Okay, Also, they actually tried to intimidate Claire Headley by putting her stepfather
Her
up there.
stepfather. Yeah.
But oh gee, he never showed up on the stand either. I wonder why. So because you don't, if you don't want to make Scientology the focus defense, then don't be bringing Scientology in to testify for you. If because I think they one of the things is anytime anybody mentions the word Scientology, it had a negative connotation towards Danny. Is the popular defense's popular statement is just that every time you mention it, it goes bad for Danny. Like he's not getting a fair trial because he's a Scientologist. I said, but I mean, anybody with a religious that it wasn't that because he's a Scientologist, it's because of what Scientology did in his defense.
Right.
And his belief that he could be entitled to get away with that and that he didn't do anything wrong. It's more about that than the word Scientology. That's what it's going to mean in the trial.
And it's just so funny how, I mean, it's every time they try to pull their cheap tactics, it backfires every time. Like this stuff might have worked 30, 40 years ago, right? But there was no internet. And so some of these intimidation tactics were effective. But these days, every single attempt to do something just blows up in their face, but they keep doing it. And I guess that just comes back to you can do what the policy says, and we're not going to do anything but what the policy says. And they're just they're going to keep inserting their foot into their mouth until hopefully they go poof. But it's hilarious.
I do think some of it has backfired on them this time. I don't think Scientology is doing a very good job of reading the room right now. With the trial of this magnitude and everything that was coming out, for Vicky Proberesky to actually file that complaint with the prosecutor's office was kind of made them look really shady. Then went to the LAPD to file mass complaints about every LAPD officer who testified in the trial. If that doesn't look retaliatory, I mean, if that doesn't look like, okay, here's the thing, everybody says if you say the word Scientology, they're going to come for you. Did not Vicky Proberesky's actions actually prove that? Actually show that people are saying that for a good damn reason?
It's harassment, but they're never going to follow through with it, I don't think, right? Because if they follow through with it and they actually have to go through discovery, that's the last thing they want to have happen, right? They want to try to intimidate, but they don't want to wind up in court and having to testify and provide discovery. That's not going to end well for them, and hopefully it happens soon. But
Sean Hawley threw it out, trying to blame it on Judge Olmedo for not putting a protective order on the evidence. You shouldn't have to tell lawyers not to share stuff because that's just the law. Okay, I mean, she did. She actually threw that out there. You didn't put a protective order on it. It was more than likely, because of the civil case. Okay, because Tom Mesereau, which one of the most ridiculous things that I saw happen from the beginning. I started speaking on this particular case because Tom Mesereau brought in the Book of Ethics of Scientology and got it admitted as evidence as proof as to why the women can't testify, because they have a contract with Scientology to never speak against them. It's a lifelong contract. It doesn't matter if you left. Okay, there was a whole big thing with the Supreme Court going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They brought that book in of ethics in there to prove it. Okay, then when the prosecution used that same book of ethics that they brought into evidence to prove, they also had a policy that you couldn't report a crime or say anything about an upstart member. They
Oh,
cried like a stuck pig. They
like,
whined and cried and carried on. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, boo boo, but isn't that your evidence you brought in? Like, wasn't that what you brought in there? So, like, they tried to get it thrown out, and it stayed. And that's how the whole thing started going back and back and back. Um,
it's just it's the whole. It's so weird.
oh, Record. I'm gonna put that up, Record. He's making a play on words here. Funny how Masterson didn't win. I guess you could say Masterson couldn't master sin.
Okay, that's clever.
Oh,
That's
that is
clever.
that's
You
our
sneaky
Record.
devil.
Yeah, he's sneaky. He damn good with the words too. That was Brill, Record. Hey, Mocking, steal that line if you do a meme on Masterson. It's not stealing since he put it in public. Okay. You might even say
Right.
that, oh no, Mocking's right on it. I knew he would. Okay. You might even say that he'll get his hide tanned in the pin. HYDE. His cat. Yeah, never mind.
Oh yeah, the hippie guy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Apparently,
yeah.
he's not going to get looked upon too well when he gets to the big clink after August
No,
either.
I've
So
heard I've heard that this they don't really think of people like this. But then again, I do believe that he will still be protected. He is a Scientologist and they are going to he's an upstat, and I think they may actually try to protect him in some way. Um Unfortunately, well,
I don't even know how
as
that would work or
loyal
what
as
they would
he's
do.
been,
But
as loyal as he's been with him, his whole family. I mean, his whole family, all his friends. I mean, he ran a whole little he almost ran the cool kids club of Scientology for the longest time, right? No, it was very cliquish. Everybody in that age group and all it is like they used the younger stars for that to cultivate and build their cult up. Just
I
call it
mean,
what it is,
who wouldn't want to hang out with DJ Donkey Punch?
Me, just for that.
Oh my God, he's such a weirdo. But yeah, and well,
I
and
mean,
now all his buddies have been kind of defending him, and Ashton Kutcher and all them. They're a bit of a precarious spot, and maybe certainly doesn't look good if
listen,
nothing else. But
we all know people on different levels. I don't you know what? Here's the thing. I don't blame Ashton Kutcher for not knowing what goes on in Danny Masterson's bedroom. I can't blame him for that. There were only two people there. I can blame Danny Masterson because he knew better. He's the one treating people lesser than. I don't believe it was Ashton Kutcher. And I don't think he co-signs anything that Danny Masterson did. I'm not going to blame him for his actions. I'm going to hope he says nothing or he comes out against it. But I hope he doesn't back him up. If he comes out and backs him up, then he gets whatever he gets. Okay. That. But I kind of feel for people that know you on a different level. I mean, there's been lots of reporting lately on a few news articles that came forward that hit my DMs on people who were like lifelong friends with someone who just got convicted, who just got charged actually of being a repeat offender for crimes against minors, and they don't know what to do. Like it kind of ruins your
yeah,
life. I mean,
yeah,
I have to, if anything, I have sympathy for anyone who cares about Danny Masterson because the
that is
reality is it happened and you
that's
can't
fair. That's
justify it.
fair.
You know,
That's fair. They don't know that they knew anything necessarily, right?
every
So yeah, that's
single
absolutely true.
attack happened just two people in the room. Okay. Just two people in the room, mostly in private in his bedroom or somewhere of that nature, right? Just two people. Okay. They were all Scientologists at the time. It happened as parties of his. They were of an age where people are hooking up and doing things anyway. They don't know what happens behind closed doors, even if they had suspicions. Luke might have to do some soul searching, but as a Scientologist, I doubt he will do any soul searching about putting these women in their position when he knew, especially with one of them, how inebriated she was and how she wasn't in control of her body, and literally handed her to Danny Masterson because he said he would take care of her. I hope he's got second thoughts now.
It's disgusting. Yeah.
But then again, if he believed that it's not, I don't know about you, but I don't automatically think somebody's going to do something like this. So, like, I can understand why they don't believe it at first. But what, after hearing the testimony, I don't know. I mean, they're just going on the line that the women are all making it up to hurt Danny Masterson. For what end? You're never going to get a penny out of Scientology, even if you win. You're never going to get anything out of Danny Masterson, even if you win. To what end do they think that they conspired to do this? Seriously.
And to put themselves through what they've had to go through to get here, and then to have to,
Exactly.
I mean, it's traumatic enough to have to testify to this stuff one time, and then a mistrial, and you have to do it all again while the harassment's happening. I mean, this has been absolute hell for them for years, right?
Exactly.
What is the benefit? There had to be some massive benefit in order for that to be worth it, right?
What you know what the
And it's
benefit
not
is
there.
for a victim? Closure. You're not crazy. It did happen. Closure. It wasn't right. Okay. They were willing to do whatever they could just to say, I did what I could. Especially Jane Doe 3. When she found out there were other victims, she felt guilty herself. She penalized herself. She beat herself up that she allowed it to happen. Because she didn't speak up. Because she didn't do more. Because she kept trying to save him. That was the testimony. Okay.
Wow. That's powerful and just terrifying.
Exactly.
Imagine being in her shoes, what that must have felt like, right? I mean,
Yep. Thank you so much, Shill. She says, Happy Otter Day to you. You live in a river, you look like an otter, and you act like one too. Happy Otter Day. Okay. I don't live in a river. I can't be an otter. Like, I'm a bear, but I love otters. But thank you for the rhyme, Shill, and thank you for the support. And Mocking has a question because it's about the differences in the two trials. And I did want to address this too. He doesn't recall much about the first trial about the victims being drugged. Why was it more prominent in this? Because the defense kept bringing up the fact, why would the women go back? Why didn't they report it when it happened? Why were they still in contact with Danny Masterson? Okay. The reason there were pretrial motions in the first trial that prevented it, of course, the defense said, you've got no physical evidence about being drugged. We're going to bring people that say, you got no blood, you got no DNA. We're going to push hard back on it. They didn't want to say that he drugged them. Okay. The reason we got to talk about it in the second trial is because Philip Cohen, in every cross-examination of the victims, brought up the fact that there were differences in their testimony, that they had spots in their memory that they were saying, I remembered it now, but I didn't remember it then. I changed the word here. I'm not sure about this, because they were using language, and he kept attacking at it like that they were trying to make it up. The prosecution came back and said we should be able to say why, and brought forth all the testimony as to why there were differences, why it took so long, why they felt the way they felt, all the scenarios. They did actually talk about the feeling of not being in control of their body in the first trial. Every single victim got to say that they felt they weren't in control of their body. They felt that they kept going in and out of sleep or consciousness, they said. They had spotty memory about stuff. They were actually saying the same thing, but they didn't use the word drug. And they didn't hammer home that it was from that drink. This time, they said, have you drank before? Have you been drunk? Did it feel like that? And they said, no. Like, this time, they were able to actually spell it out, that the sipping of those drinks is what made them incapacitated. And it was hammered home by the prosecution in this one.
or maybe not that or maybe not the sipping of the drinks did it, but it was a sequence of events, right? Because you can't prove it,
Yep.
but they were able to say, after I
Hmm.
did that thing, then this happened. And all of them
Exactly.
had the same sequence,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Because here it is. Even though we don't have physical evidence like a cup with the drugs in it, here's the thing. That detective got to come out and tell the jury. It wouldn't have mattered. It would have been out of their system by the time they got to the hospital anyway, and it still wouldn't have been there. We still would have only had the testimony of what they said. And that was a lot with the jury. I know that would have meant a lot to me. Because
Right.
then,
Well, yeah,
because
I guess
now the defense
toxicology.
can
Yeah.
go, well, you can't believe anything because they don't have any evidence that there was drugging. Well, I'm sorry, sir, because it happens every day. This detective says he has cases of it every day, and there is no physical evidence because it's not in the body anymore.
Right.
Okay, so it wouldn't have mattered. So they got to knock that out of the park, and I was very, very happy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That was absolutely key.
Yep, I know. I find it odd too, mocking. I wish they were allowed to talk about it more. There were a lot of things in the first trial that I could understand why the jury got deadlocked because of some of the things that could not be explained fully because they were prosecution was kind of hindered in the really narrow parameters of speaking on Scientology, the very narrow parameters of speaking why the women didn't come forward first. About the civil lawsuit didn't get mentioned in this one. We got to learn all about it because Philip Cohen brought it up. If you're going to bring it up as
Oh,
motive, he brought it up as motive as to why they were doing what they were doing, why they organized to have this trial. So they were allowed to talk about it. They were allowed to talk about the harassment and the multiple filing of charges in the LAPD again for harassment for things that were going on with them, about the hacking, about the stealing of social medias, about the sending of pictures of their butts with advertisements on them for a free good time. How would you like to get that in the mail? Anybody in the chat? How would you like to get a picture of your own butt, knowing what happened to you, with an advertisement on it that you want a good time? And that is what Scientology, or actually they state representatives of Scientology in support of Scientology and Danny Masterson were sending out on social media and everywhere. Like this was harassment. I mean, that is actual attacking a victim. That is just
I must have completely missed that. That's crazy.
yeah, that was
That
in
is absolutely insane.
yeah, that came up in the harassment accusations in regards to in this trial. It became more clear. They got to talk about their emails getting hacked. Actually, Sean Hawley had the nerve to present an email to Christine, I believe, Jane Doe 3, which she actually clearly got to say, that's an email, and part of it's what I wrote, but not the rest of it. I didn't write all of that. Part of it's from an email that I wrote. It was doctored. It was from the hacking. And then they got to talk about the harassment and she was hacked. It's like it's like it I kind of feel a little bad. I won't say that they didn't do a good job because I will say that the defense team came out 150% for Danny Masterson. They just kept tripping over themselves because there wasn't anything they could defend. Everything they tried to use ended up going the other way because it could be turned. You present an email that's not exactly her email, then they get to ask, why is it not her email? I mean, I'm just saying. Prosecution was on the ball. So were the Jane Does. They're the ones who said, hey, that wasn't my email. You know, they were on the lookout for all the shenanigans because they're used to dealing with Scientology. They were scared. They had their attorneys there to protect them. They were intimidated. If anybody looked at them crosswise, they said something because they did not like they didn't want to go through. They were harassed regularly. They had panic attacks on the stand. They have lived in a hellish situation for a long time, and I just hope some of that goes away. And I hope if it doesn't, and Scientology does what they normally do, and so does the Masterson clan, which is gang up on everybody and try a smear campaign. I hope that everybody, including the media, will actually fight against it instead of sensationalizing it and just leave the victims alone. The victim blaming was the worst for me in this. It's on my list now of conversations I want to have on a regular basis to get things changed because that was the hardest part to hear. Um, Especially in a place like Los Angeles, it's in California, which has some of the strongest laws, Marsary laws, that actually protect the victims against being persecuted that way for what happened to them. Um, that was heartbreaking. Well,
And
I
that's just part of. I mean, I said this already, but that's just part of what's so horrific about the whole thing is that I mean,
mhm,
just the victim blaming is just baked into the entire thing, right?
mhm,
And it was taken to the extreme here. So,
it was.
hopefully, if nothing else, there's a little bit some public attention comes to this, right? I mean, I do think some of these there's more YouTubers out there talking about this stuff. There's more celebrities starting to make jokes about it, so. I think it's getting a bit more exposed. Hopefully, that pushes the needle a little bit further down.
Mhm,
And I mean, most people see it for the joke, and well, it's not really a joke. It's a horrific, disastrous thing that it is. But the more
mhm,
people that know and hear this, the better, right?
mhm. Yeah. Definitely. Anna, in answer to your question, are the victims filing a lawsuit? The victims have a civil lawsuit already that was filed back a while ago in regards to the harassment and abuse that they have taken at the hands of Danny Masterson in Scientology since they first filed their charges in 2017, since they first started speaking out. Um, Definitely. That civil lawsuit was put on hold while the criminal lawsuit went forward. That's standard procedure. It is actually better for them that there's actually a conviction here of the two. Also, in a civil lawsuit, they have a little more leeway. It's only the proponent of evidence, the proponent of belief that something is true. In actual, you don't need a shadow of a doubt. In civil lawsuits, you get to go forward with, is it most likely it happened? Is it probably so? Not language you often hear in legal, but in civil, it's uh it's allowed and it should go smoother. But they're fighting Scientology. They're named in that one, and Scientology is a tree killer. They will tie them up legally with papers like you would believe. Also, that suit already has thousands and thousands and thousands of sheets of paper on it. I kid you not. Tony Ortega, please, everybody, give him his credit. If you want to follow anybody in regards to this, including the civil lawsuit or any of the Scientology lawsuits, sign up for the Underground Bunker. The link is below. It's worth it. He does links to the documents. He talks about stuff. He's got a great website. He the man. Okay. And I can't thank him enough for getting this case out there that needed to be out there and taking his time to do it. Okay. You know, I'm not going to say he's unbiased. He's obviously doing it because he thinks Scientology is wrong, but I back him on that. If you think something's wrong and you want to fight it tooth and nail, then you go for it. And I got to say, that's what he's doing. And I'm behind him 100%. But when it came to his reporting and saying who said what and what happened, he was diligent. He was as unbiased as he could be. He made all of the points and he did the best he could for all of us because there are no transcripts coming out. This is a criminal case for a huge violation, a very serious crime. Okay. We're not going to get the word for word. We're not going to get anything like that. Okay. If it wasn't for Tony Ortega, no one would know what we know now.
No, you know
Okay.
what happened behind those closed doors, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I just hearts for Tony Ortega. Go to his website, subscribe, go give him a heart, Yeah, I'm telling you, he definitely deserves it. Marking says, didn't Zenu put Bixler in classes to show that she did? Yes, she did. They said, what did you do to deserve this? She went through all of they made her pay $40,000 to $50,000. And Jane Doe won too. They paid, although Jane Doe 1 did get an NDA out of it and got some of the money back, but still, they made her pay for her own classes to decide what she did wrong to deserve these.
I'm
Yes.
telling you, it's a brilliant system. You make a mistake, or they blame you for making a mistake, and it's your fault, and then you have to pay. Like, and it
Mhm.
they do it.
They do it. And I don't know. Is there anything you have any question, Harold, that you wanted to ask about the trial or anything you wanted to put out before we wrap this up?
Well, I was muted. I think just so with the civil trial, is that scheduled, or is there now like when might that kick off, or do we have any idea?
Well, it should kick off. Well, first of all, we have to go through sentencing of Danny
Right.
Masterson, which that is going to be on August 4th. The sentencing hearing has been tried. We have an
Hmm.
evidentiary hearing on the actual discovery being disclosed to
Which
other
could
people.
that could
Yeah.
be tomorrow, right?
Well, that is
Um,
actually pushed to next Wednesday, but I
okay.
don't know. They may change their mind now that the verdict is in. Okay. But I do expect to have motions filed. I do expect to see an appeal coming. I mean, if Cohen, thankfully in this trial, he only said the word mistrial maybe 3 times, not like the 170. And I'm exaggerating. I know it. Don't come for me, but not like every day, in the other trial. But I would expect that they are going to try. This is traumatic for their side. This is guilty. There is no coming back. He's not like he's out on bail. He's in jail, and this is bad. And they're gonna still fight. I don't think they're folding their cards and walking away. That would not be their style. They don't do that. Um, Although how
It-
much Scientology is going to stick with Masterson in the civil trial is something I'm going to closely be watching. We'll be watching that one here too. You're welcome to join
yeah.
me for that, because that's going to be a mess too, because now you're going to have them both ganged up together. Scientology is going to come out full blown in that one. They are actually named. So they are going to be defending themselves and Danny at the same time. Or maybe they'll, now that he's convicted, throw him under the bus and say all the harassment was him.
They very well might. It's not, what is there? There's disconnection, and there's one right below that where it's not quite disconnection. It's,
Yeah,
I
but
forget what it's called.
I
But
do believe that they think that you've done something terrible. Like, they will actually, if you're in the Sea Org, they'll get rid of you if you cheat on somebody or you have anything to do with somebody else's wife or partner, like for that. But actually, since rape doesn't exist in their culture, how could they possibly have anything to say about it? Like, he's guilty
right,
of a crime that doesn't exist in Scientology. So what are they going to kick him for? Bad press? Lack
right.
of, yeah, he's more likely to get kicked for bad press and lack of funding than he is anything else. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, I do think, that certainly, I mean, Ms. Cabbage is going to do what he has to do to protect himself, right? So what Crazy Cat said, right?
Yeah, but
It does
he's
sound
not
like
going to
it's
come
not,
out with a moral statement against Danny Masterson. Not,
no,
no,
yeah,
it's
no,
not going to
no,
happen. No, that's
no.
not going to happen.
But I mean, narcissists do have a way of shooting themselves in the foot over and over again. And I don't know. I think I agree that the next one trial is going to be incredibly interesting to see how they react and
Mhm.
how much more quickly they dig their own grave, because it
Well,
feels like the clock is ticking at this point.
I think he realizes that, because look at how long it took for them to actually serve him from several of the other lawsuits. Like, he went around the planet. He had everybody covering for him. They served him like everywhere they possibly could, and tried to make it legal. That took forever. It took like a year and a half to serve him on one of the other lawsuits. I think it was the one about child labor laws
Yeah,
in
and
the Sea
eventually
Org. Yeah.
the judge is like, "Can you just tell me where the guy is?" And they're like, "Well, he might be." And they're like, "Come on, you can't keep saying you don't
They
know where he
had to
is, assholes."
threaten they had to threaten the lawyers with contempt and going to jail if they didn't say where he was. Yes, they did. They had to actually threaten them. No, well, if you're going to cover for him, then we'll just, like, serve you. Hmm?
Right. Well, and I mean, what's the best thing for a narcissist? Beating the IRS. That probably makes you pretty puffed up and
Yeah,
feeling like get away with anything. So
yeah. More has to be done on that, because like that, I want petitions. Like, I am actually going to start talking to our local representatives and start pushing back. Like, how could a church be sanctioned to not pay taxes and everything like that when they have a cultivation of violence and crimes? If that's what's going on, like in the church, that's been going on, but in Scientology, if they're going to have this culture of rape, then I'm sorry, that's against the American laws here in the United States. Okay, I'm only going to speak for the United States, where our IRS gives them, tax-free status. I think if you actually have things that go against our laws, you should not have tax-free status. I mean, you're not an island. You want to be part of the states, right? Then
and
obey our laws. And if you don't want to obey our laws, get the hell out. There's
and
plenty of other
I'm
countries.
pretty sure religious funds shouldn't be spent on hiring private investigators to follow people and installing cameras in their yards and like what.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, hopefully they start looking at it a bit more closely. But I think since it's a religion, they seem to think they have to kind of walk on eggshells. But I don't know if they do or not. It's
I also want to back a victims fund for everyone that has had to deal with the mental abuse of Scientology. They are abusers of human nature, indeed. How could they possibly tell you that something so violent and evil that happened to you is your fault? And yet it doesn't even exist, but it's still your fault. Like, either it
right.
exists or it don't. Like, how could it be my fault if it doesn't exist? It's like, what? Like, hmm. I think that there should be the Catch 22 fund, and Scientology should have to
Right.
withhold everything and put it in there, and we'll start giving it to the victims. But on that, like, I know I'm being ridiculous. I feel for everyone who knows Danny Masterson, but I don't feel for Danny Masterson right now because I don't
Nope.
think he's going to wake up. I don't. If he was contrite, if he would if he would like anything, be honest about the mistakes we make as humans, I could give him all the grace in the world. I know that sounds crazy, but I would, because that would show the human side of it. That would show recognition. That would show some, self-awareness. But I think he's going to fight to the end, so I don't feel for him. But everybody who knows him, I feel for them. I don't want to see people bashing everybody around him. Go for Danny and Scientology all you want if you're in my DMs, but do not bring anybody else up because they're all victims. And you know
Right.
what? And I know people get upset when I say this, but even Danny Masterson is a victim of Scientology.
No, that's absolutely true. Right. He was
Okay.
raised in it. I mean, he
He was
didn't. Did he
raised
have?
in it.
He didn't have a choice. And I can't even imagine what it'd be like to grow up in something like that and
Right.
that just be the
Because
only thing you
yeah.
knew. Right.
And
I
and
mean,
and they pruned him, they praised him, they lifted him up in all his bad behavior from the get-go. He's the man, okay? His whole family's in there. If he even said once, if even say in that long-term relationship with Christine, that he even got an inkling that what he did was wrong when she said, "Oh my God, you just broke my heart. You actually did that while I was sleeping and you're laughing about it," and everything was over. Because I think he really loved her. He stayed with her a really long time. I don't think he's devoid of passion or feelings or love. Okay. I think something might have went off in that head of his. Okay. But to lose everything he has, if he recognizes it, is not something anyone is really going to do willingly right away. He would have lost all of his family. Everyone he knows is involved with Scientology. Everything in his life is about Scientology. Hmm. I hope while
yeah.
he's in jail and away from them, he can save himself. I hope he does.
Maybe now he's actually safe enough to start to think freely for himself. I mean, uh, as
I
sad
doubt.
and pathetic as it is for it to have happened this way,
Mhm.
right? I bet maybe he won't. I don't know. Because if it's something, if that's all you've known all your life, I could
So,
see it going either way. Maybe he will, and maybe that he's just going to go down this way. Which, and they're
the
both sad, you
yeah,
know.
it is very, very sad. The only thing I can wish for him is clarity and just, the ability to see things for what it is and just come to the terms. I don't know what he'll be able to do about it without losing everything, but I just hope he gets some clarity on the situation. I don't have a damn bit of grace for Scientology and the damage that they do, but I do feel for all of the victims. I hope that this gives them some closure and it gives them some strength into continuing their battle because it's not over for any of them. It's not over for any of them. And let's be honest, it will never be over for any of them.
No, even once out, it's going to haunt them forever, right? It's these things don't just go
Exactly.
away. I mean, it doesn't.
Mhm.
There's justice, but that doesn't really truly fix. It doesn't solve their problems or what they've
Yes.
been through. The experience is still
Right.
there, and the
Or
trauma is still there. And
exactly. And
I can only
everybody will be
hope that.
saying, there's justice, there's this, there's that. So your justice is one thing. He will be paying for these two crimes. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. In some way. He's paying. That the word guilty right there, he's paying. Okay. It happened. It gives them the closure that now it happened. It's documented in a court of law. It happened. It's true. He's guilty. Period. No more doubt to what comes out of their mouth anymore. But that's just not enough. They still had to go through it all this time. And I feel for them. I hope that there'll be restitution, that there's some way that they get the help they need, they have the support that they need. I does believe that people are on their side. They have people around them that are helping them. But I know it's not over for them, and it won't be. And they still got the civil trial. They still have all the wrongs that were done in this trial that have to be addressed. And on that, I
I,
guess,
yeah,
yeah,
that's because I fear it's going to be even uglier in the civil trial for them, which sucks. But maybe they'll be able to find some peace and hopefully winning that as well, and then hopefully knowing that maybe they helped some other people get out of this crap, right?
true. I
I mean,
hope
at
that
their own
it gives.
sacrifice is terrible, but that could be a little shining light for them, maybe, right?
I do, and I'm thank you for bringing that up, because that's the point I wanted to land on. Let this be encouragement for those of you with wrongs against such a large organization with this horrible reputation of doing all these evil things. That, you know what? Sometimes the mosquito can cause enough pain to bring it down. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Now there's precedent. If anything, this is precedent against Scientology and against what happened to those women. But mostly, let's let's be honest. They said this trial wasn't going to be about Scientology, but in the end, it is. It's about what happened to the victims. I understand that. But the interference and what get on and how it actually played out and what we actually get to do about it and why it took so long is all about Scientology. So we won't forget. They are not the unbeatable. They are not unbeatable. They're
And
not.
every waterfall has to start with a single drop. So
That's right. So be water, people. Be water. Thank you, Harold, for joining me. Thank you, everybody else. I'm going to actually go to my game night before it gets too late, but I appreciate you all. I know I've been missing. I don't know if I'm coming back like tomorrow or the next day or the next day after that. I need time, but I wanted to share this with you. I know you wanted to, and it was important. And be patient with me. I will be back. I just don't know when. Um, Thanks, Harold. You're welcome anytime you want to talk Scientology. Because, hey, by the way, I'm not done talking about Scientology. I'm not.
I got all kinds of fun pontification rabbit holes I could go down. So I was trial aside, I would love to hang out and talk. Yes, somebody else who can speak my language and actually kind of understands this stuff,
I
because I'm the
know,
only person I know so weirdly obsessed with it.
hey, when you find your tribe, stick with it. You're definitely welcome here, along with
Well,
everybody
thank
in the
you.
chat. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And on that, thanks again, Harold. I'm going to put my lovely outro on from the amazing Mocking Media and see you all soon. Okay, bye.